You think you know why people disappear. You've told yourself comfortable lies about trauma, about self-protection, about boundaries. But what if I told you that the person who cuts everyone off isn't running from pain? They're running toward something far more dangerous. What if the isolation isn't a symptom of damage, but a calculated move in a game you didn't even know you were playing? There's a type of person who walks through life collecting relationships like artifacts in a museum, observed, catalogued, and then abandoned when they no longer serve a purpose. They don't ghost you because you hurt them. They ghost you because you stopped being useful. And the truly disturbing part, you probably know one of these people. You might even be one yourself. Let me take you somewhere uncomfortable. Imagine standing in a room full of people who claim to love you. Family, friends, colleagues, all the connections you've spent years building. Now imagine walking out of that room and never looking back. No explanation, no guilt. Just the clean, surgical severing of every thread that once tied you to the world. For most people, this thought is terrifying. For others, it's Tuesday. The psychology behind this phenomenon isn't what you've been told. Pop psychology wants you to believe it's all about attachment styles and childhood wounds. And sure, those play a role, but they're just the surface. Beneath that surface lies something the self-help industrial complex doesn't want to acknowledge. Some people cut everyone off because they've discovered a truth about human connection that the rest of us are too afraid to admit. Machiavelli understood this 500 years ago when he wrote that it's better to be feared than loved, if you cannot be both. But he also understood something darker, that the truly powerful are neither feared nor loved, because they've removed themselves from the equation entirely. They've realized that every relationship is a liability, every connection a potential weakness, every person in your life a variable you cannot control. Think about the architecture of modern loneliness for a moment. We live in the most connected era in human history, yet isolation has become an epidemic. But here's what nobody's saying. Some people aren't isolated by accident. They've weaponized their solitude. They've turned disconnection into a strategic advantage. While you're juggling texts, managing expectations, and performing emotional labor for people who drain you, they've opted out entirely. And they're not suffering, they're thriving. The Stoics had a concept called opatheia. Not apathy in the modern sense, but a rational detachment from things outside your control. Other people, according to this philosophy, are the ultimate uncontrollable variable. You cannot govern their thoughts, their actions, their loyalty. So the Stoic removes their power by removing their importance. But what happens when someone takes this philosophy to its logical extreme? What happens when apatheia becomes misanthropy, dressed in philosophical clothing? You need to understand something crucial here. When someone cuts everyone off, they're not making an emotional decision. They're making a calculation. They've looked at the ledger of their relationships, what they give versus what they receive, and decided the balance sheet doesn't make sense. Every conversation is an investment of time. Every emotional exchange is an energy transaction. And for some people, the return on investment has dropped below an acceptable threshold. This is where it gets darker, because there's a subset of these people who aren't running from toxic relationships. They're running from all relationships because they've realized something disturbing about themselves. They've looked in the mirror and seen the pattern. They're the toxic one. They're the chaos agent. They're the person everyone else will eventually need to cut off. So they do it first. It's not self-awareness leading to growth. It's self-awareness leading to preemptive isolation. But there is a deeper, more dangerous truth we haven't touched yet. Consider the myth of Timon of Athens, the misanthrope who Shakespeare immortalized. Timon was once the most generous man in Athens, throwing lavish parties, giving gifts, supporting friends. When his fortune ran out, those same friends vanished. So Timon retreated to a cave and cursed humanity. The traditional reading is that Timon was a tragic figure, betrayed and broken. But what if Timon was the smartest person in the story? What if he was the only one who saw the transaction clearly? Every relationship operates on an economy of exchange. You give attention, you receive validation. You provide support, you gain security. You offer love, you expect loyalty. This isn't cynical, it's observable reality. The problem is that most people operate on credit, constantly in debt to others or constantly being owed. The person who cuts everyone off has simply declared bankruptcy. They've walked away from debts and assets alike because they've realized the entire system is rigged. And here's what makes your skin crawl. They might be right. Think about your own relationships for a second. How many of them would survive if you stopped initiating contact? How many people in your life reach out to you versus how many you have to chase? How many relationships are sustained purely by your effort, your emotional labor, your willingness to bend? Now imagine someone who's done this audit and found the answer unacceptable. They don't rage against it. They don't seek better friends. They simply delete the entire category from their life. The Buddhist concept of non-attachment gets weaponized here. Buddhism teaches that attachment is the root of suffering, that clinging to impermanent things, including people, guarantees pain. The spiritual path involves letting go, releasing your grip on outcomes and relationships. But there's a shadow side to this teaching. Someone can use non-attachment not as a path to enlightenment, but as justification for emotional abandonment. They're not enlightened, they're avoidant, but the philosophy gives them cover. We're at the 8-minute mark, and I need you to pay very close attention to what comes next, because this is where the psychology gets genuinely unsettling. There's a personality pattern in psychology called the dismissive-avoidant attachment style. These individuals learned early that relying on others leads to disappointment. So they develop aggressive self-sufficiency. They don't need anyone. They don't want anyone. Connection feels like suffocation. But here's the twist. This isn't always formed in childhood. Sometimes it's formed in adulthood through a series of disillusionments so profound that the person's entire worldview shifts. Imagine someone who tried, who showed up, who loved deeply and trusted completely, and then, systematically, every person they invested in failed them. Not through dramatic betrayal necessarily, but through the slow accumulation of small disappointments, broken promises, and unreturned energy. One day, something breaks. Not loudly, quietly, like a bone fracturing under sustained pressure. And they make a decision that feels like sanity. I'm done. But this decision comes with a cost that nobody talks about. When you cut everyone off, you're not just removing toxic people. You're removing witnesses. You're erasing anyone who knows your history, your patterns, your truth. You can reinvent yourself completely because there's no one left to contradict your narrative. This is incredibly liberating and incredibly dangerous. Without external mirrors, you can become anyone, including someone you wouldn't recognize. Nietzsche warned about this when he said that if you gaze long into an abyss, the abyss also gazes into you. Isolation is an abyss. When you remove all human contact, you're left alone with your thoughts. And for some people, that's exactly where they want to be. For others, it's where they slowly come undone. The question is, can you tell the difference before it's too late? Now we need to talk about the digital age, because social media has created a new species of person who cuts everyone off. They don't disappear into a cave. They disappear into a carefully curated online persona that requires zero real human interaction. They have thousands of followers and zero friends. They broadcast their thoughts into the void and receive validation from strangers who don't actually know them. This creates the illusion of connection while maintaining perfect isolation. This is brilliant in a horrifying way. They've solved the fundamental human problem, the need for recognition without the burden of intimacy. They get the dopamine hit of social approval without the vulnerability of being truly known. And when the online persona stops serving them, they delete it and start over. No explanations. No goodbyes. Just a new avatar, a new story, a new performance. But there is still something we haven't addressed. Something that sits at the core of this entire phenomenon. The real reason some people cut everyone off isn't about other people at all. It's about control. Specifically, it's about the terror of being controlled, influenced, or changed by another person. Every relationship changes you. Your speech patterns start to mirror those you spend time with. Your beliefs get challenged and modified. Your very sense of self becomes a collaborative construction, shaped by how others see you and how you see yourself through their eyes. For most people, this is fine. It's how humans work. We're social creatures. We co-create reality together. But for a certain type of person, this is an existential threat. They want to be entirely self-authored. They want their thoughts to be purely their own, uncontaminated by outside influence. So they remove the outside. They become a closed system, a universe of one. The irony. This is impossible, even in total isolation. You're still influenced by everything you've already absorbed. The language you think in came from others. The concepts you use to understand yourself were taught to you. The very idea of being an individual is a cultural construct. You cannot escape influence. You can only create the illusion that you have. And that illusion requires constant maintenance. You have to justify why you're alone. You have to construct a narrative where everyone else is the problem. You have to build an ideology of superiority or victimhood or enlightenment that makes your isolation make sense. This is exhausting. But it's less exhausting than vulnerability. Here's where it gets personal. If you're watching this and feeling seen, if you recognize yourself in this description, you need to understand something. You're not special. You're not uniquely damaged or uniquely enlightened. You're engaging in a very human pattern that's been documented for thousands of years. The hermit, the exile, the recluse. You're not the first person to decide that people aren't worth the trouble. But you might be lying to yourself about why. Because there's a question you need to ask, and you need to answer it honestly. Are you cutting people off because they're toxic, or because intimacy terrifies you? Are you protecting yourself from harm or from growth? Are you setting boundaries, or are you building walls? The difference matters. Boundaries are flexible. Walls are permanent. Boundaries say, this far and no further. Walls say, stay out entirely. And here's the thing about walls. They keep you in as much as they keep others out. Schopenhauer had this parable about porcupines in winter. They huddle together for warmth, but their quills hurt each other, so they move apart. Too far apart, they freeze. Too close, they injure each other. So they must find the optimal distance, close enough for warmth, far enough to avoid pain. Most people spend their lives adjusting this distance. The person who cuts everyone off has decided the warmth isn't worth the quills. But they're also freezing. We need to address the elephant in the room. Some people who cut everyone off are dealing with genuine trauma. They've been abused, betrayed, exploited. Their isolation is a survival mechanism, not a choice. And for these people, distance is healing. This isn't what we're talking about. We're talking about the people who cut off everyone as a pattern, who leave scorched earth behind them, who burn bridge after bridge and call it self-care. The distinction matters because one is healing and one is avoiding healing. One is protecting a wound while it recovers, and one is making the wound your identity. One says, I need space to figure this out, and one says, I've figured it out, and the answer is everyone sucks but me. Let me tell you what happens next for these people, the ones who successfully cut everyone off. At first, there's relief. The drama stops. The demands cease. The emotional noise quiets. They feel lighter, free. They congratulate themselves on their courage. They might even proselytize about it, tell others to do the same, write manifestos about the toxicity of human connection. But then time passes, and something strange happens. The silence that felt like peace starts to feel like erasure. The freedom that felt expansive starts to feel like floating in a void. Because here's what nobody tells you. Humans aren't built for prolonged isolation. We're tribal creatures. We evolved in groups. Our brains are wired for connection. You can override this wiring with philosophy and willpower, but you can't eliminate it. So the isolation starts to eat at you in ways you didn't predict. You start talking to yourself. You start having conversations with imaginary versions of people. You start projecting human qualities onto pets, onto objects, onto anything that might reflect something back to you. You start watching videos like this one, searching for connection through a screen, trying to feel less alone while maintaining your isolation. And the cruelest part, you can't admit this to anyone because you've cut everyone off. You've made your bed. You've broadcast your decision. To reach out now would be to admit you were wrong. So you double down. You convince yourself you're fine. You find new philosophies to justify your choice. You become ideologically committed to your own loneliness. This is the trap. And it's closing on more people every year. Now, let's talk about the other side of this equation. What about the people who get cut off? Because they matter too. They're left with questions, confusion, sometimes guilt. They wonder what they did wrong. They replay conversations. They reach out and get silence. They're haunted by the ghost of a relationship that ended without explanation. And here's the brutal truth. Sometimes they did nothing wrong. Sometimes they were just there. Sometimes the person who cut them off was working through their own darkness, and they became collateral damage. It's not personal. It's not about them. But it feels personal. It feels like rejection. It feels like failure. If this is you, if you've been on the receiving end of someone's scorched earth policy, you need to understand something. You cannot save someone who doesn't want to be saved. You cannot force connection with someone who's built walls. The kindest thing you can do is let them go. Not with anger, but with compassion. They're fighting a battle you can't see. Your presence might feel like an invasion to them. Your love might feel like pressure. Your friendship might feel like obligation. So you let them go. You stop reaching out. You stop waiting for the explanation. You accept that some stories don't get endings. Some relationships don't get closure. Some people don't come back. And you move forward, not because they don't matter, but because you do. But here's where we arrive at the final, most disturbing truth. Some people cut everyone off because they've seen through the illusion. They've realized that every human interaction is a performance. Every relationship is conditional. Every connection is temporary. We're all isolated consciousnesses, pretending we're not. We're all alone in our skulls, experiencing reality through our own unique filter, and no amount of communication can truly bridge that gap. We can't ever really know each other. We can only know our interpretation of each other. And if you accept this, really accept it, then what's the point of the performance? Why maintain the fiction of connection when isolation is the default state? Why pretend that your friendships are permanent when statistics show most friendships last an average of 7 years? Why invest in family when family is just people you're genetically related to, not people who necessarily understand you? This is nihilism. This is the void staring back. This is what happens when you think too hard about the nature of human connection without balancing it with the lived experience of human connection. Because yes, intellectually, we're all alone. Philosophically, connection might be an illusion. But experientially, emotionally, neurologically, connection is real. The feeling is real. The impact is real. The way another person's laughter can change your body chemistry is real. The way a hug can regulate your nervous system is real. The way being witnessed and accepted can heal wounds you didn't know you had is real. So maybe the people who cut everyone off aren't seeing more clearly. Maybe they're seeing less. Maybe they're so focused on the philosophical truth that they're missing the experiential one. Maybe they're so committed to being right about human nature that they're denying their own human nature. Or maybe they're just in pain, and this is how they've learned to cope. Maybe they're not villains or philosophers. Maybe they're just wounded people doing what wounded people do, seeking relief in whatever form they can find it, even if that relief comes at the cost of connection. Here's what I want you to take away from this. If you're someone who's cut people off or is considering it, ask yourself this: are you moving towards something or running from something? Are you choosing solitude or defaulting to isolation? Are you setting boundaries or building a prison? The answer to these questions determines whether your path leads to peace or to a loneliness so profound it becomes your entire identity. And if you're someone who's been cut off, release yourself from the need to understand why. You might never know. You might never get closure. The person who left might not even know why they did it. They might be as confused as you are. Let them have their journey. Focus on your own. Because at the end of the day, we all make choices about how to navigate this strange, painful, beautiful experience of being human among other humans. Some people choose connection despite the risk. Some people choose isolation despite the cost. Neither is wrong in an absolute sense. But one of them requires courage, vulnerability, and the willingness to be hurt. The other requires walls, philosophy, and the willingness to be alone. Choose carefully, because the choice you make today shapes the person you become tomorrow. And that person is someone you'll have to live with forever. You think you know why people disappear. But now you know the truth. They're not running from pain. They're running towards something far more dangerous.